Hello everyone. Hope you can hear me all right. This is a great venue, isn't it? I've not been here before. It's a great venue, and a great place for a series of talks just like this. And although I've not been to this venue before, I do know the area quite well. Because I come here quite a lot and have done for many, many years. Because you might be aware there's a great toy store not too far from here. I mean, it's a really good toy store. And if you're into toys like I am, it's a mecca. It's the place that you've just got to go to. It's the Apple store, right? Actually, what I really mean is a different type of toy store, because there's another one that's perhaps even a little bit more famous, just the other way when you get to the end of the road. Hamleys. Do they call it the most famous toy store in the world? Something like that. And I tend to agree with that, because I used to visit there every Saturday. Every Saturday I'd pop in. Actually, I popped in this afternoon, kind of for old time's sake, just on my way here. But I used to visit there every Saturday. It sounds a bit extreme, really, but I suppose I should tell you, I was going there to meet my grandmother, because my grandmother used to work there, my mother's mother. And what would happen is, you see, we'd get there early on a Saturday afternoon, then meet my grandmother, and then we'd go back to her house for tea. High tea, followed by Doctor Who. It used to be the highlight of my week. In reverse order, of course, the Doctor Who part, the high tea. But most importantly, it was the trip to Hamleys. Because when you think about it, for a young kid as I was, and I was, I don't know, maybe 7, 8, 9 years old, something like that. I mean, somewhere like Hamleys is, well, for me, well, it was a combination of Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory, Santa's Grotto, and maybe a little bit of heaven, all rolled into one, all on 5 or 6 floors. I mean, you've been to the Hamleys, right? You know what I'm talking about. When you're that sort of age, I mean, what could be better than a place like that? 5 or 6 floors, crammed to the rafters with some of the most exciting toys out there when you're that age. Now, I suppose it's fair to say that not all toys were that great. I mean, when you think about it, and when you're that sort of age, browsing through the store and investigating all the exciting things that they had, there were some things like jigsaw puzzles, board games. Board games, I mean, what kind of name is that? Board games? Doesn't make any sense, does it? Board games. But some of the other stuff was really, really cool. And I loved investigating all of it. Soft toys, cuddly toys, dressing up. Well, perhaps that's the subject of a whole other speech. But I really liked things like the Action Man. I really liked the kites, the Airfix kits. And up on the 4th floor, the best in the world, the model railways. Model railways. Used to spend hours looking at that. Hours. Because the great thing about model railways is you could create, and Hamleys, I'm sorry, those Harrods people here, aren't they? Hamleys did that really, really well, because they laid out a whole track. A whole track. But of course, before you got up to the 4th floor, you had to negotiate the foyer. And if anyone's been into Hamleys recently, they'll see today what they used to have back then, which is the demonstrator. Has anyone seen that in Hamleys, the demonstrator? Yeah. Right there, as soon as you go in through the double doors, there's a demonstrator. And of course, he's demonstrating the very latest thing. Now, it might be a little aeroplane that you sort of throw up like that, just a little flick of the hand, flick of the wrist, a couple of loop-the-loops, and round it comes, catch it over here. You can do it again, throw it just like that, round it goes, catch it like that. It's amazing. I used to get there early just to watch him do that. Or maybe it was a magic trick. People like magic? I love magic tricks. And I used to watch him, the close-up magic particularly. He'd have a coin over here, and he'd do something, and then it would appear here. Like, how? He'd have a coin over here, and he'd do something, and it would appear over here. How? How did that actually happen? How did he do that? I didn't actually want to know. Because for me, I didn't want to know the secret. I just wanted to see the magic. Or it could have been Mexican jumping beans. Or it could have been, the sort of boomerang that goes round the foyer a couple of times, and again, he just catches it. The demonstrator, for me, he was the coolest guy in the shop. Because he was a little bit taller than everybody else, and I don't know whether it's because I was just a little bit small, or whether it's because he was standing on a box, but he did seem to stand head and shoulders above everybody. I mean, you know the sort of thing I'm talking about, right? And he had a way, didn't he? Probably had slightly long hair, maybe a scraggly beard, who knows, maybe a tattoo or something. I don't know, but he stood out. And I used to stand and watch him for hours. Great. But you see, up on the 4th floor, that's where they had the railways. And as I said, they used to lay out this sort of, I don't know, miniature universe in a way, where they'd set it up just so with a track that ran off and maybe go around a sort of little model lake, and then sort of loop round the back. Maybe there's a little village with a church, through past the farmyard, and around the back of the hill, through a tunnel, then back to the station. Then next to the station, there'd be like, what do you call it, a railway yard, and the sidings. And what I used to enjoy looking at the modern railways is just seeing how perfectly constructed it was. It was put together beautifully, but in a way that it could be changed whenever you want to change it. You could build whatever reality you want to do when you want to change the railway track. And sometimes when I go back, it'd be a little bit different. Maybe they'd move the church. Maybe the track would have gone a different side around the lake, or introduce a bridge, something like that. I used to love it. But what I really enjoyed, because I got into trains in a big way, because I like the way that when you turn the dial, they could go a little bit faster or a little bit slower. Couldn't do a huge amount more than that. You could maybe, set some points, have them go left or right, stop at the station, things like that. There wasn't too much more that you could do, other than maybe add an extra locomotive, make it go faster. Or sometimes, what you could do is add a few extra carriages, make them go slower. But they just go round and round the track. Almost like clockwork, and of course some of the trains were operated by clockwork, right? Because I was a kind of curious sort, because I like to know how things work, I used to take the tops off the trains. I used to take the tops off and have a look to see what was inside. And what's great about little trains is they've got little engines. And little engines with little pistons and little cogs, little bits that go round and round. Some of the things I knew what they did, and some of them I had absolutely no idea. But what I really liked was the fact that they were all beautifully engineered, machined to perfection. Right there in this tiny little engine, you'd get a precise machine that was working beautifully. Most of the time. I mean, to be fair, some of the times the trains just stopped working, or would slow down, and frankly, I didn't really understand why. But the trains normally would just go round and round the tracks. I was reminded of that when I popped into Harrods earlier today. But the one thing trains didn't do was go fast. See, because if you want to go fast, and we're talking toys, you need scale-electrics. Anyone know what scale-electrics is? Everyone remember that? Scale-electrics. It's the little model slot racing cars, right? Who had one when they were a kid? I know I certainly did. You had one, Zoe? Tomboy, right? Cool. Excellent. So scale-electrics, you see, that's what you can do if you really want to go fast and win races. Brilliant. All you had to do was put the car on the spot, pull the trigger on the remote, and off the car would go straight down the track, and you're into the race. Now I had a small set, and it probably took up, it took up the space of our dining table at home. It wasn't big, it wasn't small, but it was great. Pulled the trigger, car went straight down the track, and came off at the first bend. Because that happened, right? And if, like me, when you were doing your scale-electrics, you'd be lucky to miss the family crystal. Straight into the side of the dining room wall. But that was okay, because it taught you how to get skillful at negotiating the corners and going around the track. But it was big enough for the dining room table, and you could build different types of tracks that would fit, but only of a certain size. But here's the thing, you see, because a friend of mine, he had a track that, well, it probably took up the entire space of his loft conversion at home. It was a big track. And he used to get all of his friends around. And of course it was a track that everybody was envious of. Everybody. Now, you see where my track at home had like 2 lanes for 2 cars. He had, I don't remember exactly, but he definitely had more than 2. It might have been 4 lanes, or maybe 6, or even 10. But it was the biggest track around. And we'd go over in the afternoons, at the weekends, when I wasn't seeing my grandmother, that is. And we'd race. Now sometimes it's all about speed, sometimes it's all about endurance, but ultimately it was all about getting over the finishing line first. It was great fun. But when I couldn't go around to my friend's house, I'd get a group of friends together, and they'd all bring their tracks. And so we'd build one ultimate track right there on the living room floor. Used to drive my mother potty, but that's what we used to do. Everyone would bring their tracks, and we'd add them together to create, well, what we thought, what we imagined, and what we believed was the perfect track. A long straight down the back, a corner that's, well, perhaps not so extreme, more a gentle curve, maybe a technical section coming around the back straight. And then follow that with maybe a chicane or you know, we have one of these little sections of track that if you press the trigger on a different remote control, then a little flipper would pop up in your opponent's lane and it would flip his car off the track. Well, I mean, if you want to win, you've got to do what it takes, right? And that's what we used to do. But we built the perfect track that gave us the best performance we could from the track. But you know, as I got a little bit older, I started getting into electronics, because by now I was kind of approaching O-level time, GCSEs, excuse me, as they're called today. So I knew a little bit more about how electronics work. So when I took the top off the scale Extrix cars, I could start to tinker. I could improve the performance of the cars, which I really enjoyed doing. But of course, if you wanted the absolute best performance, the absolute best performance of all, what you had to do is you had to play with a handset, because that had the resistor inside. And I don't know if any of you know anything about electronics, but these things are variable resistance. What happens when you pull the trigger? You either get more resistance or less resistance. And that was really important to understand. But you see, when I couldn't get my friends around to race, I liked to race anyway. So it was my dad. He was the one I'd ask about. Dad, will you race with me? And more often than not, he'd say yes. And we used to chat a lot, and he used to tell me all sorts of stories, loads of stories. And the ones I enjoyed most were about his wartime exploits. Because you see, during the Second World War, he was a navigator in Lancaster bombers. So he had loads of stories. But he used to tell the stories also of the fighter pilots during the Battle of Britain. I was fascinated by these stories. Because if you think about it, they had the latest machines available. Spitfires, Hurricanes, up against the Messerschmitts. They were also the latest machines. The best machines out there, built with the latest technology available at the time, operated and maintained at the highest performance levels possible. Machine against machine. Who was going to win? I used to think about that a lot. Because I'm really into performance. It's one of my values, actually. It has been for a long time. Pretty much ever since my wife and I started having children. To be fair, it's my wife who had the children. I just kind of stood there and did what new parents do, what new dads do, which is look important and get in the way. But round about that time, it was a good time to start thinking about performance. Performance is how I'd be as a father, with kids growing up. That was a long time ago now, almost 24 years actually, come February. 24 years. There are jokes about that, but I won't make them. But the thing is, in all that time, my wife and I only ever argued 3 times. Now, the most recent time, just a couple of weeks ago, when we got back from a long trip to the US, a huge argument, didn't speak for days. But as you probably noticed, I talk a lot, and sometimes I go off the point, so you probably should get back to this, because Dale asked me to talk about why does creative start at the top? And it's a really interesting subject. And so the other morning I started to think about it. What on earth could I write about or talk about and write my notes as far as how does creative start at the top? And as I sat there thinking, I thought, well, probably got that the wrong way around, really, because it's not me you've come to see. It's really the subject that you've come to hear about. But then I thought, well, it's the idea of creative actually starting at the top, isn't it? Or is it more that it starts at the top? You know, by this point I was starting to get a little bit confused. Maybe I was overthinking, and I overthink it a lot, so I thought the best thing to do is a bit of a mind map. about what I was going to talk about. And that's when I really got confused. So I thought, do you know what? I'm going to talk about what I really want to talk about. And so this is what my speech is about, frankly. Because at the airport the other morning, well, a couple of weeks ago, when we had that big argument, jet lag to the eyeballs, you know the sort of thing, you're just back off an international flight, and 350 people want to be the first person in the queue at passport control. Have we all done that? We have, right? So it's a bit of a race off the plane. And we're racing away, trying to be first, until my wife says, "Look out! Look out," she says. Just as I walk through a puddle of vomit. It's a huge argument, as I said. We didn't talk for days. So why does creative start at the top? Well, if you think about it, I mean, where else could it start? Where else should it start? Now, I totally understand the bit about what Dale was saying in terms of you've got to foster, you've got to encourage the enthusiasm from within, and that's totally right. But the way I look at it, if you're thinking about business and business alone, who's driving the bus? Who's actually in charge of any organisation? Well, of course, everybody has a say in it. But fundamentally, where does the buck stop? Right? You've all heard that figure of speech, haven't you? You understand what that expression means. There's only one place that creative can start, and it's got to be the top. No doubt about it. No choices. No options. It must start at the top. So what do we really mean by driving when we say who's driving the bus? Well, what's really important is for any organisation to try and figure out what its competitive advantage is. I mean, I know it sounds obvious, and I know it sounds as though it makes sense, but do you know how many organisations forget that really important step? Because frankly, if you don't have a competitive advantage, it's an uphill struggle. And if it's an uphill struggle, it's going to take a huge amount of energy, a huge amount of effort. So the first thing you've got to do, if you want to get creative at the top, is to understand what your competitive advantage is. And then you've got to make a pact. And the pact is to do whatever it takes. That's sometimes not easy, especially with large organizations. Time and efficiency is hugely important. Do you know time is the biggest enemy to business? It really is, because if you think about how much time is wasted on stuff that doesn't involve generating and building your business, it's an enormous drain. And if we want to get totally brutal about it, and I said to Dale, I'm not going to pull any punches this evening, and he said, good. That time is being spent, if it's not being productive, on salary that's not producing anything. So you've got to say totally focused and totally efficient. That doesn't mean be a bad organisation. It certainly doesn't mean be bad bosses, but it does mean keep an eye on what's really going on. Because what you've got to do is utilise your resources as effectively as possible. That might involve stock control. It might involve your advertising spend. It might involve deployment of a fleet of vehicles or various other operational considerations. But it's absolutely got to involve your employees too. I mean, does that make sense? It does, doesn't it? But it's your workforce, your employees, who've got the expertise. So why wouldn't you take full advantage of them? And when I say that, I mean full advantage. But I notice there are a lot of false assumptions in business. Loads of them. And so what's really important is truth and honesty. Is your product actually any good? I mean, I know you think it is, but is it really? You've got to be totally truthful about this. And you've got to be prepared to do something about it if the answer is not yes. Despite what they say, do your employees actually give a damn? And how would you know? So these are things you've just got to be aware of. See, this is why I call it parallel universes. And you saw that on the slide before. Because I tend to believe that there are parallel universes. Because right here, right now, we're all together in the same room at the same time, doing pretty much the same thing. The only difference being that I'm standing at the front and you're sitting there. But all of our universes have collided. But the thing is, after right now, we're all going to go off in different directions. And you're going to go on with your lives, and I'm going to go on with my life. It may be that we'll meet again and our paths will cross. But in the in-between times, we're doing our own thing. And so what we've got to ensure is that during the time that we spend together, whether it's now or in business, that we're using that time effectively for the collective goal, which of course in business is to do business. But I think we also have to be totally honest about what loyal customers actually are. So what do I mean by that? I mean, we understand the concept of loyal customers, right? And it's something we all strive for, don't we? But what are loyal customers? Are they our friends? Well, sometimes. Are they our colleagues? Well, sometimes. Are they our family? Sometimes. But there are other people too. Do our customers really want to be friends with us on Facebook? Do our customers really want to follow us on Instagram? Now, there may be a good reason why they do, but I don't think we should assume that things like this are the be-all and the end-all of our corporate existence. Sometimes there's a headlong race into things that have some relevance, but not the only relevance. So I guess my point here really on this slide is simply to have a reality check and be brutally honest about that reality check. Because if you don't, you're going to be spending time and energy on something that's frankly not that relevant. Does everyone agree with that? Make sense? So being creative, what's that really all about? I've got to tell you it's a myth. Sorry. I actually think it's a complete myth. And here's why. Being creative is just a skill. And skills can be learned. I mean, they can, right? It's just a skill, but it's based on a simple set of techniques. And the first thing that's really important is knowledge. You've got to ask yourself, what do your customers really want? You've got to say, what do your competitors actually provide? And you've got to say to yourself, what can your business really do well? Because that's the start. It's got to be based on real, hard data that's meaningful, not just a set of assumptions. Dale was talking about architects before. And you know, most creative people I've ever worked with have been architects. And for anyone in the room who's worked with architects before, they're a particular and sometimes strange breed of people. And I've worked with all sorts of architects in all sorts of strange corners of the globe. And they've all got strange peculiarities. One fellow I know, he was absolutely exquisite in understanding the three-dimensional space that he conceived in his head. He understood three dimensions better than anybody else because he lived it in his head before he committed it to paper. But you see, the problem with that was in his head it was so perfect, he'd never want to show up to the site or come and visit the results of his work afterwards because it wouldn't be nearly as perfect as the way he'd imagined it. They're weird people. But the thing about the great architects is their solutions. And when I say solutions, I mean the really elegant solutions. They're the ones that are the simplest solutions of all. Because what they've done is they've understood what's been going on. They've taken the time to ask themselves, what do they need to know? So you've got to find all these things out, but then you've got to do it again, but this time really honestly. Because that can happen, can't it? You can tell yourself, well, I know it's not the best we could do, but, you know, maybe if we compromise and change and all this sort of thing. You've got to be totally honest. And of course, the idea is to come up with what people call unique selling propositions. But here's the thing. I don't actually believe in any of that. I don't believe in unique selling propositions at all. I believe in unique buying propositions. Because if you're in business, it's to trade in some way. You want to exchange your goods and services with something that somebody's going to buy from you. So don't you need to understand what they want to buy rather than what you're trying to sell? Here's how it works in River Island. We only sell what people want to buy. Everything else is a waste of time. So we start by figuring that out. And then, frankly, we try and cram as much of that into our stores as we can. Simple, right? Okay, there's a little bit more to it than that. But it starts with the idea that you have to sell what people want to buy. So I don't believe in USPs. I believe in UBPs, unique buying propositions. And then you've got to research. And the best way for you to research is go and buy something. Go and buy something. Evaluate the experience. Think about what you need. Think about what's important to you about whatever that need is. And then think about the process that you go through as a real, genuine consumer to have that need satisfied. Now, it doesn't matter who you buy from. It could be a hamburger or a taxi ride. It makes no difference at all. But go and consume something. And think about the process. Understand what's going through your mind as a consumer. And notice what happens during the transaction and afterwards. And use that knowledge in your business. Hugely important. And then you've got to get a personality. For your business, I mean, maybe some people need personalities too. But businesses absolutely need personalities. And we've all been at the sort of event. It might be a cocktail party, it might be a business meeting, it might be anything at all, where there's someone that's a little bit larger than life. Have you ever had that experience? Larger than life. There's somebody in the room who just stands out. Maybe they're a little bit louder, maybe they laugh a little bit more, but they get noticed, right? And they get noticed because they've got a personality. But what is a personality in a business context? Well, a personality is simply made up of these things. It's values and beliefs, experience, decisions, and attitude. And if your business can create each one of those things and put it together, and then deliver that each and every time, you have a personality. And if your personality stands out from your competitors, you're going to get noticed. It's very simple, very straightforward, but it's often overlooked. But you've also got to develop certain things in your business. You've got to develop a sense of curiosity. And Dale was talking about this earlier, when he asked us to look around the room and think about all of the ideas that had gone into what exists. You've got to get curious as to how things work. And within the business, you've got to instill an attitude of excellence. And you've got to relentlessly pursue that excellence. And you've got to ensure that your entire business and everyone and everything in it constantly strives for that excellence. And you've also got to get into the business. So what does that mean? Well, if you have phone calls coming to your business, get on the phones. Talk to your customers. If you sell things through stores, do shop visits. But most importantly, put yourself in the store for the day. Figure out what's actually going on with the people who work for you and the people who try to buy from you. Because you know, there's nothing more frustrating than trying to give people money and then refusing to take it. I had this just the other day. You know, World Cup is on. I don't know if anyone's following it. It was a great game last night, wasn't it? Fantastic. Who saw that? great game. And I'm not even a football fan. That's the funny thing about it. But the thing is, every 4 years, it's a great time for me and my family to watch football. Because we get quite patriotic and we think, foolishly, that England are going to go all the way. Right? And this year they didn't, did they? I think I heard there was one person at Manchester to see the team arrive back. I don't know if that's true or not. But anyhow, we thought, World Cup, time to get a new TV. Because round about World Cup time, there's great TV promotions. And frankly, ours are getting a bit old and we watch an HD model. We haven't got an HD model and so on. So, Saturday a few weeks back, off we went to one of these big box electrical stores. You know, the sort you see in the high street, not high street, but in the retail parks. And apologies if anyone in the room works in one of these companies. But I honestly can't remember which one went out of business. Was it Comet or Currys? It was one of them. I just don't know. Right? Talk about personality. Oh, they didn't have one. But anyway, that's a whole other story. So, great promotions. Wanted a TV? Go down to the store. Money on the credit card available to make the purchase. Put it in the back of the car. Get home. Switch on. World Cup in all its 60-inch plasma-driven glory. Or so we thought. Isn't it frustrating when you want to give a business your money and they just don't want to take it? Has anyone had that experience? It's really frustrating. And I won't bore you with a whole long rigmarole of why we just abandoned ship and went home and watched the World Cup on our old TV, but we did, because their business was not set up to take money from customers in the way they could have done. I'm not saying they weren't taking money, but there were people in store who wanted to buy who weren't buying. Now, full marks for designing a store, putting it in a retail park, adverts in the window, TVs in the back, full of staff, customers coming in and going out. It worked perfectly, apart from one small detail. They weren't doing the money they could have been doing if only they'd been paying attention. So you've got to get into your business and understand what's going on. So how can you be creative? Anyone here thinking of running their own business one day? Anyone here who already runs their own business one day? Well, you're going to like this next bit. Never, ever, ever be your own boss. Don't do it. But be your own customer. Because you've got to think about it from the outside in. Be a customer. Use your products. Because if you don't use it, you won't know what's good about it, or worse, what's bad. I mean, imagine that. You've got a warehouse full of stuff you've just had imported from the Far East or wherever it is, and it sort of sells okay, kind of, but it's not doing as well as it could. Why? Because maybe there's just something wrong with it that you could have spotted if you'd actually used it. So phone your business if you've got some kind of telesales operation. See what it's like as a customer to actually buy. See what's really going on. But you've got to do it authentically and genuinely. So here's another story. I'm full of them. One of my kids this week is working on, he's doing work experience. He's 16 years old, just finished his GCSEs. So he's going to start doing things like building his CV. So he's on work experience. So he's at British Airways. He's having a great week. He's having a fantastic time. He loves it. Wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't end up working there full time. But here's the thing. Yesterday, and the way they carve up their work experience weeks is that they've got sort of little modules. So in the morning, he does a module on something, and then he goes and spends time with another department, a module on something else. This is all in the field of marketing. And yesterday was customer engagement. So I thought, oh, this is interesting. Because I knew I was going to come and talk. And he said, so we started talking about the executive club. Anyone here an executive card holder? British Airways? One. Okay. That means two. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. But people belong to loyalty clubs in here, right? Hands up who's got any kind of loyalty club. Fantastic. Okay. So, British Airways, they've got their executive club program, and you earn miles, and the more miles you get, the more benefits and so on. You get how that works. But he was talking to the marketing team, and they were talking him through the layers. There's the blue, and then there's the silver, and then there's gold, and then there's lifetime gold, and then it turns out there's one above that, which I didn't know about. So got to figure out how to do that. But never mind, that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is the people that were telling him all about the executive club aren't members of the executive club. Because they don't actually fly British Airways. Because since they took away the staff perks for cheap flights, they all go EasyJet. Because it's cheaper, right? So when they were talking to him about the executive club, they couldn't actually tell him what the real experience was. Now it turns out he's an executive club cardholder. I reckon by the end of this year he might even have made it up to the next tier. But the point was, he knew more about it than they did. They're industry veterans, he's been there 2.5 days. Doesn't make any sense. If you're in the business, you've got to use the products. Otherwise you're wasting time. And what did I say about time? Does that make sense? Great. But you've got to make both ends meet. And so what I really mean there is you've got to build your experience from the customer's point of view. And then of course, you've got to create the system that can deliver them. Identify the needs and then fill it. Only sell what people want to buy. Here's something else that's really important. It's what I call the power of not. It's about knowing when not to do stuff. So this one's about when to specialise, but when not to specialise. What to specialise in, but what not to specialise in. This is about recognising the real limits to your business. And you get this a lot with salespeople, right? Because they want to sell, and sometimes their performance is based on their productivity. So the more things they've got to sell, the better for them, they think. But you know what? Sometimes you start really diluting and overstretching. You've got to stick with the core of what you're good at. So the point is to know what the limits are. It's what I call the power of not. And it's also really important to know when to call in the experts. Which is some of the time, but not all of the time. But if you're driving the bus, you've also got to know what the real problem is in your business. Because you're going to hear a lot of stuff coming up. Okay? Because people are going to say, well, this, that, the other. They're going to give you information. Not all of it is the real problem. Sometimes it's a symptom of the problem, but not the problem itself. So as a business manager, it's your job to figure out what's really going on. Finding out the real problem. And stop the spinning plates. Because you get a lot of this in business too. And I know I said it's, look busy, here comes the boss. And you get a little bit of that in business. But perhaps more importantly, what you do get is failed systems or redundant systems that are still operating. And I'm not necessarily talking from an IT perspective, but I remember years ago, I was talking to my father's secretary, and this was a long time ago, because he was talking about introducing electronic filing, and that was before there was any decent electronic filing out there. So one of the things I was tasked with was trying to figure out how that process could be put into his area of the family business. So what that meant back then, and this probably sounds a bit laughable now when I say it out loud, because this was sort of in the pre-technological times. Okay, so what you had to do is you had to take the Daily Post and scan it. Okay, because it's got to be electronically filed. But you've also got to take the day's output and scan that. But are you scanning it before or after it's been signed? And are you signing it before or after it gets put on letterheads and so on? A little bit complicated, but the thing was, it was a process. What you had to do was figure it out. So what we had to do was take the original process and adapt it to the required process. And I remember talking to my father's secretary, a professional veteran who'd been in the business for, I don't know, 30 years. Actually, I think she started the year I was born. And that is going back some. And I said, well, what's your process? And she said, well, you know, we've got a pink copy and a white copy. And because what she was talking about was the days when they had carbon paper, which had gone out with the Ark probably 20 years earlier. But she was still doing, on a daily basis, what she'd been doing the day before. It was just a process that was inappropriate for the business. She was keeping busy, she was gainfully employed, fully occupied, but she didn't need to do it. The world had moved on, but the system hadn't. So because time is the enemy, you've got to stop the spinning plates. Now I said before, that employees are an untapped resource. And that's true. But here's the thing. You've got to be very careful with your employees. Because although they're an untapped resource that can provide huge benefits to your business, you've got to be quite careful. And you've got to do it right. A few weeks ago, actually it was last week, I was at my daughter's speech day. You know, it comes up around about this time of year. End of term is coming, prizes are given out. Speech day. And the keynote speaker said something really interesting. She said, you know, your daughters, all your daughters in this particular year group were born in the year 2000. They're not going to retire, probably, until the year 2060. They're going to spend a long time working. It's a bit of a scary thought, isn't it? And the thing is, in that long time working, there are good days at work and bad days at work. And we all have them, right? Some of the bad days, well, what do they involve? Actually, they don't involve much more than this. The office move. Someone in our business once said to me, he said, you've got to be really careful with office moves because you've got great employees and they're pretty loyal. I know they're loyal because they come every day of the week. But you plan an office move and you've got to be very, very careful. Because some people, you see, they sit by the window. Are they going to still be sitting by the window? Some people, they're on the aisle. Are they still going to be on the aisle? This is sounding like Bridge Show again, isn't it? Whatever you do in an office move, your employees are going to think there's an ulterior motive. There might not be. You might just need a bigger office, or maybe the lease is up. You know, there could just be simple, genuine commercial reasons for moving your office or taking bigger space. Nothing to do with your employees at all. But as soon as you mention the office move, you start getting all sorts of difficulties. Because there can be a fundamental mistrust in businesses. And it's something you've got to be very, very careful about. You just have to be aware that unless you're really careful, things can come back and bite you. So what's that got to do with cake? Well, there are good days in offices too. Some of the best days are birthdays. I mean, if you think about that for a second, when somebody brings in a cake, what happens to the energy in the office? Totally transforms, doesn't it? Totally transforms, just because of birthday cake. So what was going on in the office that you needed something as simple as a cake to lift everybody's spirits? So actually, even though your employees are a huge untapped resource, you just have to be very, very careful because they're fragile, really fragile. And that's important to remember. So you've got to engage and motivate, and you've really got to lead from the front. You've got to be prepared. There was a guy on the video before, he said you've got to walk the talk. And he was right. You've got to be prepared to lead from the front. You've got to be able to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty and show people that if you're prepared to do it, it's totally okay for them to do it. Or if you put it the other way around, if you're prepared to do it, why wouldn't they? Does that make sense? So that requires energy and enthusiasm. But above all, effective communication. So there's a friend of the family, I'm going to call her Matilda, although that's not her real name. And she was in hospital recently for just some routine surgery. Happens, getting on in years. But she's been in pretty good health up to this point. Bit of a sudden thing, but these things happen. So they said to her, listen, when it comes to pain relief, we've got a couple of options for you. Would you rather have morphine or an epidural? She said, well, I don't know, what's the difference? He said, well, the thing about morphine is fantastic. It's great, it can take away all pain, but it's going to stay in your system for a little while. Could be a couple of weeks before it completely left your system. But an epidural is different. See, with an epidural, it's going to completely take away the pain. But within a couple of hours of us removing the epidural, you'll be completely back to normal. She went, oh, I'll go for the epidural, really. Sounds fantastic. And it was. Until she woke up after surgery and she thought she was paralysed. She couldn't feel her legs. She couldn't feel anything from the waist down. Can you imagine an elderly lady, nearly 60 or 70 years old, couldn't feel her legs? She's all on her own. She's got no visitors, nobody to explain, pressing the red button. I can't feel my legs. Can you imagine the fear? Can you imagine the horror? It's like a nightmare come to life. They've forgotten one important part. She was an elderly lady all on her own. She'd never had children. She'd never experienced an epidural before. She didn't realise that the sensation she was feeling was just part of the effects of what an epidural does. They forgot to tell her. They didn't think about what they were doing as a business from the perspective of the consumer, the patient. I mean, how ridiculous is that? So we've got to communicate effectively inside the business as well as outside. And above all, got to make it fun, right? So what I want to do is now talk to you about how we applied all of these theoretical items to one of our businesses. So I'm going to talk to you now about Oak Palm Beach Resort and Spa. Don't worry, it's not an advertisement, although there are brochures out for you. Here it is. It's in Florida. It's a hotel, 300 and something rooms, and it's 5-star. The American grading system is a little bit different from what we're used to over here. They actually call it 5-star and 5-diamond. The Americans have to do things differently, right? But it's a top hotel. And it's a hotel that's been around 20, 25 years, but we've owned it for about 10 years. And it's got all the facilities that you'd imagine that a 5-star hotel would have. And actually, even though I say so myself, it's pretty good. It's got all the facilities that you need, and as you can see, it's a great day here in southern Florida. Sea's calm, the sky is pretty much blue, the beach is pretty nice. But here's the thing. As we sit here 4,500 miles away, thinking about maybe booking a holiday in Florida, because you are, right? I mean, I plugged British Airways already. So, there's all sorts of places you could go and visit apart from that one. And they all tick the same boxes. I mean, it could be on the same stretch of beach. I mean, actually, that beach, if you look all the way down, if you can see far enough, it goes all the way down to the Keys, which is 100 and something miles, I don't know. It's a long way. It's one long piece of beach, and it pretty much goes all the way out to New York, the other direction. It's a beach, a real big beach. And there's hotels on it, not just this one. So everybody shares the same beach, pretty much. Everybody shares the same climate, the same scenery, the same views. It's a competitive market. It's tough. So we needed to get creative because we just weren't getting the business that we thought that we could get. I mean, being a top hotel, it should get decent business if things are being done right. But here's the thing, we didn't have a competitive advantage. We just didn't. And what made it worse, nobody was driving the bus. It's quite simple, nobody was driving the bus. Now, how does it work in hotels? Well, I don't know if any of you have been involved in the hotel business, but people who own hotels aren't necessarily the same people who operate hotels. And so what happened with this one, when it was first built, was that a contract was given to a third-party team of professional managers. And then we came along about 10 years ago and we bought the hotel, but it was still that same team of professional managers, but they weren't driving the bus. So, you've got to do what you've got to do. You've got to do whatever it takes. So we got a court order and we actually kicked them out. So a year ago, almost to the day, 1st of July, which is, today's the 2nd, right? So yesterday was our first birthday under our own management. We've been operating the hotel all on our own for the last year. Now, luckily, we know how to operate hotels because we do it in other parts of the world, but we just needed to take control. Now, the thing is, if we decided that we were going to start a hotel business from scratch, we probably would have taken more than 30 days to get things moving. But we gave notice to the old managers 30 days before we took over. And that was before we had a plan. So a lot of work had to be done to create all the things that I've been talking to you about. So the first thing that we had to do was we had to get totally honest. We had to be completely honest about what was good about the business, what was bad about the business. Now, one of the things that was good is our spa, and here's a picture of one of the spa treatment rooms. It's actually a world-class spa, and spa people, they win awards pretty much every other week. Getting a bit blasé about it, actually, but it really is a world-class spa. So we could be honest about that, but frankly, there was stuff that we had to be honest about in the opposite way, not really as good. Because you've got to look at warts and all, right? Because if you're going to develop any type of business, you've got to be completely real with yourself. Because you've got to find a competitive space. We've got to find a place in the market that we can operate, and a space that we could call our own. And here's the thing, because we've got a pool, right? Well, all hotels got a pool in that neck of the woods. We've got a restaurant, a specialty restaurant. So does everybody else. Tennis courts, everyone's got those. Guest rooms, some might be newer, some might be older, but you know, so far so what, right? And then we realised we had one thing that nobody else along that stretch of beach had. Actually, we had one thing that no other hotel in Florida had. Actually, it was one thing that no other hotel on the planet had. The employees. Nobody else could provide the same experience with our hotel employees because they didn't have our hotel employees. And that was when we realized that we were onto something. So we built our brand personality. And the brand personality in our case is totally focused on the employees. In fact, in our case, we call our employees hoteliers. That's one of our brand values, actually, that we call our employees hoteliers. Here's a picture of some of them now. So what did we do? Well, we instilled that personality. We installed it, actually. Training, 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 and more training. And we're only a year old, so there's still more work to be done. But we've come a long way in the last 365 days, 366. But we developed that personality that I was talking to you about. And alongside that, we developed that attitude of curiosity that I was explaining to you about earlier. The flexibility and the irresistible pursuit of excellence. Because for me, there's absolutely no point in being the 42nd best hotel in the United States. No point at all. I want to be the first on the list. I want to be winning awards every day of the week, let alone just every other week. And the only way we can do that is by constantly getting better. So we've got to look at our systems and our processes and say, is this the best we can do? I don't mean just change it for the sake of changing it, but figure out, is there a better way? Getting curious, getting into the business, understanding what's really going on. Because as I said before, just like with the architects, sometimes the changes can be really simple, if only you go looking for them. So utilising our best resource, our hoteliers, and recognising our unique buying points from the customer's perspective. So step one, the personality. Values. The values are the why. Values are the why we're in business, in our case, and of course each organisation is totally different. The beliefs, they're the what. Okay? And then of course there's the experience and the decisions and the attitude. And here, attitude for us doesn't mean have an attitude in the negative way, but it just means have a viewpoint, take a stand, have an opinion, have a position about where you are in the business and where the business is in the industry. And pursue that religiously. So that's step one. Step two, you've got to work it from the inside out. Employees first. Because frankly, if your employees aren't on board, everything else is a bit of a waste of time. It's going to be inefficient. It's going to take time. It's going to cost more money. It's going to be effort to untangle things. You've got to do things from the inside out. Does that make sense? Great. So that was step two. Step three, well, sometimes, you just got to bring out the big guns and shoot the managers. So we did. Because I'm into photography, you see. It's one of my passions. So what we did is we shot the managers. These are just some of them. We said to them, look, we're building this new business and we need a personality. And our name and our philosophy and our spirit is all about water. So what better way to kickstart the campaign is by using water in our internal campaign. And these are some of the images from the very beginning of that. But I also said you had to lead from the front, right? So this is me and Dale getting the treatment too. Because you've got to be able to walk the talk. But you see, we need the business to work. And so we felt what was hugely important was to create a model that was going to allow it to work. Because, hoteliers, anyone that works in the hotel business, it's pretty simple, really. Make the beds, cook breakfast, answer the phones. I mean, basically, that is all there is to it, right? That's what hotels do. When you boil it right down. But of course there's more to it than that. Of course there is, there has to be. But if we want to have this sense of personality pervading all the way through the business, we've got to work with our employees. We've got to work it from the inside out. Because when our employees deliver that experience to the guests, then the guests are going to enjoy it. Hopefully they're going to go and tell their friends, families. Who knows, maybe the good word will spread. But only if we work it from the inside out. But actually when you think about it, we heard this earlier, that down on the shop floor, that's where the really exciting stuff can happen, because it's the people at the coalface who hear directly from the customers. They're frankly the ones, the employees I mean, who've got the best ideas. So you've got to have a culture within the business where you've got this circular flow of information, that you've got hoteliers who are delivering service to the guests and bringing the feedback from the guests back into the business. So that if a guest says, oh, have you ever thought of doing whatever it is, somebody can go, oh, do you know, I've been hearing that a lot lately. I think I should mention that at the next meeting. Maybe we can do something about it. Because sometimes, the managers are too far away from the business. And I know it's really important to get into the business and to manage the business from the front. But you can't be everywhere all the time. And you can't be a specialist in every department. But of course your specialists in each department can. That's what you pay them for. So you've got to have this circular flow of information. And so the hoteliers have got to feed back to management. But here's the thing. Management, they've got a very particular and specific job. They've got to be commercial animals. They've got to make commercial decisions. Some of them are tough decisions that not all employees are going to like. But it's for the good of the business. So what we felt in our case is we needed to put an extra element in, this committee, that works to the side of our hoteliers and alongside the management, so that they can take this information that's being fed back and can ensure that not only do the management get to hear about it from the employee's perspective, from the hotelier's perspective, but also that they can work to keep the hoteliers enthusiastic, motivated, and fired up in all sorts of ways. Because if the hoteliers are enthusiastic, motivated, and fired up, they're going to do better jobs, right? Makes sense. So this is the model that we created. And we looked at it, and we thought, that's a bit familiar. Anyone recognise that? So that was when we realised we had the name of our Employee Engagement Committee. And here they are, celebrating our first birthday. The Starfish Enterprise. You've got to have fun, right? And it's their job, initially, to keep the employees enthusiastic, motivated, and energetic by working alongside commercial people in business. They just revealed themselves for the first time last week. They've been working on the project for months, but actually they announced themselves to the hotel population just last week. And already we're starting to see signs of how the enthusiasm is starting to spill over into other parts of the business. This is Marnie. She's a professional model. She lives in Palm Beach and she works in Palm Beach, getting paid to model. So I contacted her a couple of months ago because I said, listen, I'm really into photography, and we need new photography at the property, so why don't you come and model? So she did. And here's the thing, she sent me a text afterwards that said, that was literally the best experience I've had modeling yet. But here's the thing, I've never ever, ever worked with a professional model up until that point. All I did was lead from the front by working the values of our business and adopting the personality, because our personality is customer service. So I felt what was really important to me about working with this girl was delivering a great experience of customer service to her, such that she sent me this. But she then went on to say, can I put it on Facebook, some of these images? Which, when you think about it, is pretty cool, because it's the business working from the inside out. And she wasn't the only one, because some other models were saying the same thing, including this one here. It's become obvious to me how Palm Beach residents love your property. So word is spreading just by everybody at the property, including the senior management, from doing what they need to do. Now you can get on TripAdvisor yourselves. You've all done it before. And like any business, it's not all great news, but we're starting to see with increasing frequency how the names of our employees are making it onto the pages. It's not just about, oh, they have a lovely pool, because everyone's got a lovely pool. It's not just about, oh, they did a really good job of making beds and cooking breakfast, because all hotels do that. But not every hotel has our employees. So you've got to think about your workforce. Actually, isn't that a weird name? It's a bit like board games. Workforce? That doesn't sound right at all, does it? You know, at Speech Day, a week or so back, kind of opened a little door in my brain that I didn't realise had been there before. Because what the keynote speaker said, you know, your daughters are going to retire in the year 2060. And that was pretty profound. But you see, then she went on to say, the job your daughter does hasn't, when she retires, the job your daughter does when she retires hasn't even been invented yet. Wow. That was a big one for me. And it made me think that actually, it can be a pretty exciting time to be in the workplace. I mean, if you think about the technological changes in our industries, our various businesses, just over the last, 5 years, can you imagine projecting forward to the year 2060 and imagine what the workplace is going to be like then? And the journey that we're all going to go through to get there. It's a pretty exciting time. So why don't we harness that sense of excitement when we think about our hoteliers or our employees? Give them skills, give them enthusiasm, provide them with energy. Because there are some amazing jobs out there, and there are going to be amazing jobs. Look out, said my wife, as I walked through that puddle of vomit. Not the best morning. But the reason we argued, and the reason we didn't speak for days afterwards, is because I said to her, what was the point of that? And she said, well, you're about to... I said, yes, but you did not tell me anything useful. There was no useful comment in what you said. There was no content at all. Look out, what does it mean? Look where? Why? How about stop? That would have been more useful. I mean, she did a great job of alerting me to something, but not anything useful. Effective communication. It's hugely important. I was looking at the FX kits a little earlier, and I was thinking about those dogfights, Battle of Britain. And you see, I realised what it was all about wasn't so much the machines, but the latest technology maintained and operated at peak performance. It was the pilots flying them. I mean, it had to be. The machines were working flat out. And the machines were perfectly pitched, one against the other. So what was the difference that was really going to make the difference? It was the human performance. I find that really interesting. And you know the model trains, when they stop working or slow down, you know, sometimes it will just take a little drop of oil, put in the right place in the machine, just a little bit of TLC, just to make that machine operate the way it was designed to. It's human performance. And as I stood in Hamleys earlier this afternoon, watching the demonstration, I wondered how he did it, hour after hour, day after day. Because, you know, throwing that little airplane up into the air and watching it loop the loop and come around and catching it just so, is great for a little bit. But it's pretty repetitive, isn't it? Hour after hour, day after day, throwing, loop, catch, throwing, loop, catch. How does he do that? How does he keep coming back for more? And I realised it's actually pretty simple. It really is very, very simple. He enjoys what he does. He puts enthusiasm, he puts passion into it. He plays to his customers, and he gives the customers what they want. It's a little bit of a show in a way. He's demonstrating the product, but he's passionate about it. He's using it, and that's why they buy it. Remember, work it from the inside out, not the other way around. So does it work? Well, in this case, our business is hospitality. I've been telling you just a little bit about one small area of our business. And in hospitality, we know all about giving people gifts and providing great experiences to our guests. It's pretty much a brand new business. It's just over a year old, literally. But I know it's worked because of this. This is a gift, but it's not a gift that we gave to one of our customers. It's a gift that one of our customers gave to us. Thank you very much.